Chapter 1 of Enjoyment of Music. Let's talk about melody and musical line. Musical sound. What is musical sound? It's different than just sound because it has pitch to it. But all sound is made up of vibrations. Musical sound is more closely defined as something with a perceivable and measurable pitch. For instance, static would be a sound that is not considered musical. What is pitch? Pitch is something that is determined by the frequency of the vibrations, the sound vibrations. It's measured in vibrations per second. So the frequency depends on the size or length of the vibrating object. For instance, if you think of a flute, it's going to be smaller, shorter, higher. If you think of a bass, double bass, that's a long string, a big instrument. It's going to be lower. If you think about something that's going to vibrate faster, so if it's shorter, it's going to vibrate faster. It's going to have a higher frequency or a higher pitch. Okay. If you think about something like a guitar or a violin or double bass, things like that, fingers that are placed on the strings change the length of the strings. They shorten the vibrating length. Therefore, the pitch or the frequency changes. That's what technically happens. A note is what we use as a symbol to define where the pitch is. If you're not familiar with reading music, this won't make a whole lot of sense to you, but if you look at a piece of music, you'll see a staff, which is a set of 5 lines, and then you'll see these little circles. Some of them are filled in, some of them have lines, some of them have flags on the lines. And where they are placed on those lines indicates the pitch for someone who knows how to read music. That also indicates how long the note lasts, the duration, the time. There's also another aspect of music called the timbre. Timbre is simply the same thing as tone color. What is the color of the tone? When we talk about that, we talk about things like bright or brassy or harsh or nasal. Those are examples of some words of timbre. It describes the sound quality. If you hear a flute, you might say it's light and airy. If you hear a saxophone, you might say it's bright and brassy. This is a picture of a sound wave depicted with a building, which is kind of neat, just to give you an idea. When we define melody, you're going to hear things like tunes, you're going to hear things like cadences, conjunct melodies, etc. So melody has a linear or a horizontal aspect to it. All right. The melody is the tune. It's an entire thought. It's putting several pitches together in a certain order that turns out with something that's recognizable as a whole product. There's a range of those notes that's typical. For instance, a children's song like Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. It's going to be a narrow range versus the Star-Spangled Banner, which starts low, goes very high. There's going to have a certain shape to it, which is called the contour. It might go up, it might go down, it might wave, etc. There are different types of movement in music. The melody could move by intervals. The interval is a distance between two pitches. It might move small intervals or large intervals. So it might, Mary had a little lamb, small intervals. Oh, say, can you see? A larger interval, disjunct melody. If you think about the melody, look at it like a sentence. There's going to be phrases within the sentence, and some of those phrases will be inconclusive and some can stand on their own, just like where you put a comma versus a period. So a cadence comes at the end of a phrase, and it is a resting point. There's typically a rhyme scheme, just like with poems, when you use poems and set them to music. And those cadences tend to coincide with the ending of the text lines when you're talking about musical phrase structure. The climax is a term used for the high point in a melodic line. There's usually a peak of intensity and range at that moment. And then sometimes you have a counter melody, which is a secondary melody that you hear at the same time as the main melody, kind of thinking about it like a mashup. This is an example of musical notation for just the melodic lines. The first one is Ode to Joy. Da, 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 da. You'll remember that, perhaps? That's from Beethoven's Symphony Number 9. Then, famous song Joy to the World starts out high and it descends. You can kind of mark the way those notes go and see it descending. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Or, as I had mentioned before, the Star Spangled Banner, which is a bit up and down. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? Looking at Amazing Grace, you can give a little bit more context to phrases. So if you look at the text phrases, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, there's a phrase. It's not complete. The next phrase, that saved a wretch like me. Again, not complete. Going upward this time. I once was lost, but now I'm found. You can kind of feel it leaning into this. Was blind, but now I see. There's a sense of rest and completion in that final cadence of that phrase. Thank you.